The UN Security Council has passed a resolution condemning Israeli settlements on Palestinian land. The resolution calls continued settlement building a flagrant violation of international law. New Zealand, Malaysia, Senegal, and Venezuela proposed the draft. Israel's strongest ally, the United States, abstained from the vote. The resolution says Israel's settlements on Palestinian territory occupied since 1967, including East Jerusalem, have no legal validity. Israel had called for the United States to veto the resolution.
The draft resolution has been adopted as Resolution 2334.
Well, earlier, the UN envoy to Malaysia, Ramlan bin Ibrahim, explained what was in the draft resolution.
The draft resolution being put to vote today calls for the cessation of all Israeli settlement activities and for affirmative steps to reverse the negative trends on the ground that are endangering the two-state solutions. It also calls for immediate steps to prevent all acts of violence against civilians, including acts of terror, and calls for accountability. The text further urges all parties to intensify their efforts to achieve a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in the Middle East and to end Israeli occupations. On the implementations of the resolutions, the text is requesting that the Secretary General report to the Council every 3 months.
Well, the United States abstained from the vote, but Samantha Power, the U.S. envoy to the UN, hoped the vote will bring both Israel and the Palestinians closer together.
In reality, this vote for us was not straightforward because of where it is taking place at the United Nations. For the simple truth is that for as long as Israel has been a member of this institution, Israel has been treated differently from other nations at the United Nations. And not only in decades past, such as the infamous resolution that the General Assembly adopted in 1975 with the support of the majority of member states, officially determining that Zionism is a form of racism, but also in 2016, this year. One need only look at the 18 resolutions against Israel adopted during the UN General Assembly in September, or the 12 Israel-specific resolutions adopted this year in the Human Rights Council, more than those focused on Syria, North Korea, Iran, and South Sudan put together.
Well, Greg Karlstrom joins us now live from Tel Aviv with more. Hi, Greg. As Samantha Power was alluding to there, these are strong words in this resolution. They have been strong words through all past resolutions as well, but there seems to be no real power behind them as Israel continues to receive exceptional treatment from the United Nations.
Yeah, there is no power behind them. It's a condemnation of settlements like the condemnations that we've heard for decades now from the United Nations. Many Israeli politicians have already come out in response to this vote and said Israel is not bound by this, Israel is not going to abide by this UN resolution. These are people not only in the coalition, but also people who sit in the opposition. Yair Lapid, one of the leading centrist lawmakers in the opposition, said a few minutes ago that on this issue, there is no coalition in opposition. Almost everyone is united against this resolution. We've heard from a Likud lawmaker who's already said that in response to this, he wants to push for the annexation of settlements in the occupied West Bank. So, like you said, some tough words from the UN, but not backed up with any action and words that Israel is not planning to listen.
And Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Danon, no surprise, responded very negatively to the outcome of the vote. But he said now that he has no doubt that the new U.S. administration and the incoming UN Secretary General will usher in a new era in terms of the UN's relationship with Israel. What do you think he means by that? Is Israel looking to the new Trump administration to stop, perhaps, this history of the U.S. drafting these resolutions against Israeli settlements?
It is, absolutely. We heard before the vote that an unnamed senior Israeli official came out and said that the Obama administration had engaged in a disgraceful move plotting behind Israel's back. I think many Israeli politicians are already looking past this administration to January 20th when President-elect Trump will take power. He has promised to be Israel's best friend in the White House. The man that he has appointed to be the ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, has a long history of supporting Israeli settlements, not only in words, but he's actually the head of a foundation that donates money to Israeli settlements in the West Bank, settlements that the UN just declared to be without legal validity. Friedman has also said that he supports Israel annexing the entire West Bank. So the expectation in Jerusalem certainly is that if they ride out the next few weeks until President Obama leaves office, they're going to have a much more receptive president in the White House next month.
So ultimately, Greg, then, have all Obama's promises to move the Israeli-Palestinian peace process forward really been in vain after his 2 terms in office now?
I think it's fair to say. I mean, certainly some of the blame, much of the blame, is due to domestic internal problems here on the ground. You have an Israeli government that is the most right-wing government in decades. It doesn't have a single centrist or left-wing party in it. Prime Minister Netanyahu, before the 2015 elections, renounced the 2-state solution as a way to drum up support. So you have that government in power in Jerusalem. On the Palestinian side, you have the ongoing divide between Fatah in the West Bank and Hamas in Gaza. They have been divided for a decade now. They each rule their fiefdoms, and they can't seem to reconcile despite many attempts to do so. So not a very conducive environment to making peace on either side of the border here. But for the Obama administration, it certainly has played its hand badly. It didn't seem to come in with any strategy in 2009 for how to move the conflict forward. We've had a couple of half-hearted attempts at peace talks. One of them in 2014, 2015, it turned out actually that the Obama administration's peace push, the Israelis were talking with a Palestinian negotiator who wasn't even authorized to speak on behalf of the Palestinians. So it's been a bit of a farce for the past 8 years. It's been a very dysfunctional policy. And so, yeah, I think you can say it's been a failure.
Okay, Greg, quickly, though, as an aside here, you know, there's been calls for boycotts of Israeli products in response to Israel's failure to be more, I failed to come up with the term here, but to participate more strongly in the peace process. Do you think that boycott can actually gain some momentum enough to change Israel in a way the UN has not been able to?
Probably not, to be honest. If you listen to Israeli officials, they talk about the BDS movement, the boycott movement, as if it is an existential threat. They had a huge conference earlier this year where the president spoke, half the cabinet came to speak, and they all warned that this was doing irreparable damage to Israel's economy and Israel's international standing. If you look at the numbers, though, honestly, the boycott movement has done something like $300 million worth of economic damage to Israel. It's something like 0.1% of Israel's annual GDP over the past 10 years. It's a movement that certainly gets a lot of good PR. It's a movement that certainly is influential, say, on college campuses in the United States, in Europe, but it's really not a movement that, up until this point, has done any real economic damage to Israel and has created any kind of an impetus for renewed peace talks.
Okay, Greg, we're going to leave it there. Thanks so much for that.